wasn't sure if we were ever going to be saying this, but we're going to talk about Bill and Ted 3, which is called Bill and Ted Face the Music, and of course this was one of those movies that was like one of those will it ever happen or not mysteries for seemingly forever. Like I would have been 1 year old when Bogus Journey came out, and it almost feels like it's something I've been hearing my whole life, like people were saying, like, will there ever be a third one, and then it kind of kept coming and going, and then Alex Winter, like, really got involved and, like, showing that he really, really wanted it to happen, and you kept hearing, like, scripts existed, or maybe they did, or maybe they didn't, or scripts had been finished but then reworked, and it was just a whole thing to finally get to this point. And it's interesting that it comes at a time that Keanu Reeves is like really in like sort of a it's long past a comeback phase now, but like with John Wick happening and The Matrix having happened and coming back, and it's this whole interesting formula of things, but it's all come back in this really big way. And I will say right away, watching it, I kind of get, because you always kind of get that fear of the long-awaited sequel and how most of the times it just doesn't work out. I think Dumb and Dumber 2 kind of set the bar as low as it could possibly go in regards to something like that. So you always fear it's going to be Dumb and Dumber 2 when something like this happens. And thankfully it's not that. But it is a case of like, sort of like with Jay and Silent Bob Reboot last year. It's a case where I imagine it's a lot more effective and everything lands a lot better if you're watching it in like a full room. Obviously there's a lot of people, including me, that aren't going anywhere near theaters still, but I imagine it probably has a lot more of an impact in that kind of environment, but as long as you're a big fan in general, I could see this hitting very easily. It's even the same two writers it's been the whole time, and they have a very humorous appearance towards when we're getting into the last third of the movie. And something that was kind of a little bit concerning was hearing that the plot had pretty much come full circle, that they still have to, like, write a song that saves the universe or the world and everything. And what was so great, I think, about going from Excellent Adventure to Bogus Journey is how incredibly different they are. Like, story-wise, they have almost nothing in common, which was really great, because it made Bogus Journey so unexpected when you compare it to Excellent Adventure and what you may have expected from a sequel to it. And it's just something so incredibly wildly different. Even throwing in a whole Bergman reference in there that spawned a fan favorite character that just continued on, and continues on here also. But it does come back to not only that, but there's also a killer robot that is introduced. So in a sense, it's a plot that's it seems a little too close to Excellent Adventure, but then there's also a side plot going on where there's something trying to kill them. And a robot again, no less, but it's just one this time, so it's kind of like we're repeating both movies a little bit. So at the start, I was kind of scared for this movie, and it's like, well, you did so well with the second movie of not repeating really anything, except with some running jokes here and there. And some of those running jokes do come through here also, like the joke with the stepmom has continued on in a very bizarre direction, but that the unexpectedness of the joke is what makes it work. So, obviously we're going to have a whole sequence where we're bringing in past figures again, which is the entire plot of the first movie and something the second movie didn't even do at all. So it's like it's all the familiar stuff coming back, but they still do enough of a different thing with them that it doesn't feel like, because there's a huge difference in the whole whether something feels like a genuine callback or something feels like, hey, we'll just do this same thing again because we've got nothing. And these do feel like not only just genuine callbacks, but like I said, a feeling of something coming full circle is more what it feels like. So it comes together in much more of a sort of clean, and like I said, I guess you could say, in some cases it would be in a predictable fashion, but it's the whole thing about how it kind of lines up with one of the things that was really apparent in the first movie was the point is that we know where we end up. The question is how we get to that point. So I thought this really captured that really well and had those points that we recognize, but it's not about those things that we recognize. They just happen to be a part of what this whole thing is, which really works. So, like on top of, because you think at first when it starts you're just going to get bombarded with callbacks. Like we've got the stepmom running joke and stuff like that. And it's the same actress. It's also the same actor playing Ted's dad. But no, immediately it gets its first big laugh on its own without using a callback, and that is seeing where Bill and Ted have ended up in regards to making music. And so they're in charge of the music for this wedding at the beginning, and it just goes horribly, terribly wrong in this very grand fashion. And it's like the fact that they were able to score a laugh that big without that early in the movie, without resorting to a callback. That was kind of them playing the music at the wedding was kind of the hope where it's like, okay, maybe this movie does know what it's doing and it will be able to do its own thing without relying too much on the other movies. So, and they're still married to the princesses, but if I remember correctly, I think the princesses have been played by two different actresses in every movie, so that almost feels like a running joke in itself that the princesses are two different actresses again. It's like the kids and the Vacation series. But once it sets in, and we kind of see where they are in life now and how they're having like marriage problems. They're going to marriage counseling and stuff like that, and they have a problem separating from each other and kind of being their own thing. You can almost say it's a metaphor for the movie versus the two that came before it. But what's interesting about this is it might seem like at the start that it doesn't have like there's almost a flatness to it, like almost aesthetically, where it's like in this age where movies are shot digitally now. There's something about it to where it can look really off, like movies are too polished looking now, and so it almost makes them look like cheaper than the other ones. But I actually think the sort of drabness of that kind of works because it shows it almost feels like there's such a far cry away from what was going on in the other two movies, whether it be the going to heaven and hell in the second movie or the time traveling to all the different places in the first movie. This one kind of feels like you get a sense that they're trapped in like reality, to where there's like none of these different aspects to it, and like they're arguing with Ted's dad at the wedding about how like no you guys did not go to heaven and hell, and they're arguing that they did, and it's almost like an Alice in Wonderland kind of thing where it's like you almost it almost feels like was that all a dream or what, with how much this reality feels grounded. And then obviously, shit starts to go down. So, and there's a whole thing going on with there's like a rip in time, so everything's getting like mixed together, and something from one era is ending up in a different era involuntarily, and it's all going haywire, so they have to fix that. With the help of their two daughters, and this is another thing where it's the kind of thing that's introduced in sequels that you think, this rarely works, can you make it work? The whole thing of having, the new generation of what we had before, and it's, I think something that helps a lot is, particularly, what's her name? Bridget Lundy Payne, I think, who plays, Ted's daughter, who is basically this young teenage girl version of Ted, and in a sense Keanu Reeves, and that works really well also. Samara Weaving is Bill's daughter, and I'm obviously not Samara Weaving's biggest fan, but at the same time it's like you get a sense that there's like a camaraderie there because of Samara Weaving is likely here because of Keanu Reeves' already connection to that family, so there's that. But she's fine. But both of them do add something that I think would have made this movie a lot worse if they weren't able to pull it off in the way that they do, and didn't have the charm that they do in this whole storyline of the daughters basically do, like, because it's the daughters have the section of the plot where they're going back and getting historical figures to put a band together. Um, which is an interesting concept because it's like it's the same thing that Excellent Adventure was, but that was just gathering the historical figures for the history report. So it's like the fact that they're getting musicians from other eras to put a band together almost seems like you would think that would have been the plot of the first movie, but you only think about that after the fact, which is really interesting. But so there's that going on. That was something else I kind of worried about. Was it feels like at the start it's very busy. Like there's a lot happening at once. Like there's a lot of subplots going on. But the great thing though that actually makes it work is that subplot even isn't necessarily the word because all of the storylines have the same goal. So they are all for a purpose. I guess the only one you could single out that doesn't really is the fact that they're having, marriage problems with the princesses. But at the same time, that does bring in the whole, like, there's something profound about the two of them are almost too stuck together, and the whole sort of having your individual life and stuff like that is in there. So it all works, and that goes along a lot with the more, it's an interesting word to use for Bill and Ted, but the profound angle this movie starts to take as it goes on. And as far as them, like, and I do like the fact that they play more on their being, like, when they run into different versions of themselves is something that you'd think we'd run into more in this series up to this point. But it seems like they really got to play with it to its full extent in this one, so that was really great to see. And then you've got, like, well, just in general, talking about the two of them, Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter, coming back to these roles. And what's interesting about it, and it's kind of interesting to think about how we got to this, is that I don't feel like Keanu Reeves feels as at home as Alex Winter does. At least that's the vibe I get watching it. And I almost wonder if it's the case of, like, because Alex Winter hasn't had as many, like, roles as Keanu Reeves in between these two, like Alex Winter, it was easier for him to kind of get back into Bill's mindset. Whereas Keanu Reeves has been, and obviously we know that Keanu Reeves is, acting isn't necessarily, he's not by any means a character actor, so, but he has gone from, like, all these different roles, some of which that have really, really blown up, like Neo and John Wick and all them, that he had more he had to, like, go, like, push through to get back, to Ted, despite the fact that one might argue that Ted is not a far cry from him himself, but, even so, you can see Reeves kind of having a bit more trouble settling into it. I thought anyway. I know I've read a lot that a lot of people think they just fell right back into it, and that's but I don't know. I just kind of wasn't sure about Reeves there at first, but as it goes on and you start to warm back up to the characters, then it starts to. However, there are some people that can fall right back into it no matter what, especially after long careers, like William Sadler in particular as Death, and there's a reason he became a fan favorite character very quickly. I remember the first time I saw Bogus Journey and how much I just loved that character. Like I would have taken Death getting his own movie when I first saw Bogus Journey, and it's seriously like no years have passed whatsoever with him in this part, and it's even funnier because it's like, the whole joke in Bogus Journey was the person that's behaving like this character is Death. And, like, that's constantly apparent to you. Like, he's the one that's playing Battleship and Twister with them. He's the one that's shopping to see if a hoe is more effective than a scythe and all that. It's great. But the great thing about this is that we've gotten so used to him now as a character, and we've accepted him as a character, that it was only, like, halfway through his screen time in this movie that it occurred to me again how funny it is just the fact that he's deaf. Like, just, like, it doesn't, like, whatever he's saying, whatever he's doing, whatever it is, whatever his purpose here is, it's just like when they call him Death, it just kind of sets in again. Like, oh yeah, it's still funny as hell that it's Death that is this character and doing the things that he's doing. Um, and I like the fact that's the thing too, is that that's how much that character works. Is that we're not still on the one joke idea of, oh, it's Death doing unexpected things. We've now accepted him as a character, so it's almost so it's almost an afterthought. The funniest thing about the character. So that's great. And obviously we've got one of our cast members that's no longer here. Obviously, is Carlin. But we do have like a satisfying enough like reference to him. Visually and everything. But there's another thing here that's kind of underlying that's really great, and that is that Kristen Shaw is playing the daughter of Rufus and basically has his job throughout the movie. And it's the character's name is Kelly, which is George Carlin's actual real life daughter's name. So it's like there's definitely a sort of like loving nature to what they've done with Rufus's character and how they've gotten Kristen Shaw to kind of take that the place of that. So that was really nice. So talking about all the returning characters, obviously it's going to be a little risky when you introduce new characters. And it's like, are they going to be as effective or not? Will these be instant classic characters in the way that Death was? So we've got a robot named Dennis, I believe. And as I said, I was concerned when he showed up because it's like, oh, they're sending robots to kill Bill and Ted again. That's what Bogus Journey was. But he's sort of futuristic looking. He sort of has the, I can't believe I'm referencing this out loud. He gave me the vibe of like, what was it called, Jet Jaguar from those old Godzilla movies when they were getting really bad. But it does kind of give it like an intentionally hokey quality. And it was like, oh, he's a killer robot, alright. And every time he appeared, it's like, I don't know how I feel about this storyline, it's, whatever. But then there's like a character turn early with this robot, and when his character started to turn is when it finally dawned on me who was playing him. And then it all started to come together and make perfect sense. The killer robot is Anthony Carrigan, who you might know as NoHo Hank from Barry. Who really has taken off in that role and made this, like, he's like this perfect comedic actor that looks like a serious actor. And it's like, it's only when he started speaking normally, and in the fashion that the robot starts to as it goes on, that it's like, I just realized who that is, like, halfway through this movie. And then, yeah, I could see this character being as much of a fan favorite as somebody like Death. So that really works also. So as far as talking about it getting into like profound places, which like I said you may or may not expect from Bill and Ted, but it is like, it does really have something to say as it goes on, and they kind of keep running into future versions of themselves about like the whole thing about like having this fear of not living up to what you could have been or what you wanted to be. And how there's like, if you catch it early enough, there's still time to change something or to do something about that. To be satisfying, not just to yourself, but as far as your place in the world. And when you get to the point where obviously they have to write the song that is going to like save the world, and it's like, the task of having to, because there's no way to actually put that song, like write that song yourself and then put it in this movie and make it a part of the movie and have it have the impact of, yes, this song is so great it would save the world. So they take the route of, it's not about like the sound of the song, it's basically how the song is played, is where the real sort of savior element comes into it, which is really great. So when you look at it that way, and you think about the approach it's taken to this stuff, what's really great about this, and I suppose you can say this about the others, the second one certainly had a darker nature to it, which, like I said, is very welcome because it's a nice balance of those two movies, but the fact that there's like a lack of cynicism in these movies, and especially this one, and with its different messages, where it's like, these days when you do stuff like this, it's all about being self-referential and ironic and all that stuff, and it's like, when it's all about doing things ironically when you're like trying to update it while doing the same thing, is something that's gotten so played out at this point. Like, you can still do it well, but for the most part, there's so many like lazy ways to do it, and it's like to just say, hey, remember that thing we used to do? Well, it's kind of dated now, so we're gonna treat it like it was bad, and that we know that now. So, and they try to get by on that, but this movie doesn't do that at all. Like, there's even moments where like, there's nothing that feels like it's making fun of the past movies, and it even avoids stuff like when you hear that there's going to be a Bill and Ted movie that comes out in 2020, your first thought might be to expect a joke about like phone booths being dated in this era. But I don't remember that joke ever being made, unless it went past me or they did it quickly. But it's like, the fact that that joke would have been so damn predictable, it's such a relief that it's not here. It's like, and the fact that they're not doing that for the humor. I don't really remember anything or anything significant as far as the humor comes from that is based on the fact that we're this far into the future now compared to Excellent Adventure. So that's, yeah, that was really a relief also, and it showed you that they had something they wanted to say and do with this movie that wasn't just, you know, the easy shit that comes from these delayed sequels like this, and that alone tells you that this wasn't done just, you know, for the sake of doing it. Like, this is something that all the people involved really, really, really wanted to do, whether it be Alex Winter or Reeves or the writers or whoever. Um, so it's a movie that I've looked up some of the reactions, and I'm not as enthusiastic as a lot of like the really, really big fans are, unsurprisingly. Um, but I'm glad it exists in the form that it does. So there is that, and like I said, the fact that it has these moments that are like genuinely touching without feeling too overbearing about it. Because it's like, because there are moments like this where you can like pinpoint in comedies when oh, now we're trying to be, you know, emotional or whatever, and it just doesn't ring true. It just feels really false and forced. But here it just kind of goes into it so seamlessly because of what's going on, and where the characters are at this point, that it makes sense when the scenes come that are like that. So that's, yeah. And there's a post credit scene that's absolutely worth waiting for. so um, so yeah, so obviously, it's for somebody like me that wasn't like really, really attached to the other movies. I love the old movies a lot, but they weren't ones that I've seen like a billion times over. But it's still very, very satisfying. Like I said, it's definitely something where I feel like not just like the really, really big fans, but like get these fans in a group, and this movie would just absolutely, just, yeah, be monumental. So I think that's really all I have to say on that. So I'm gonna try to squeeze out a couple of like pairing up some of the new releases that I haven't touched on yet, like Project Power and The One and Only Ivan and stuff like that. And I think now that we're in September, we're going to start getting new releases regularly on the weekends again. Like, I think Charlie Coffin's movie is the next one coming up, which should be very interesting. And I think they're pretty steady all the way up to then. So yeah, so September and October should be pretty consistent as far as stuff getting out between the three of us, and then we'll see where it goes from there. So until all that, I think that's it.